of famous teachings, a lot of famous speeches in history. One of my personal favorites is I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King. That is like my favorite. That's my go-to. I turn it on and cry once in a while just because it's so powerful. Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln. Famous speech. Changed the culture that we were in America. And there have been many more. There have been some infamous ones by evil leaders like Hitler that gave really good speeches, but they were for bad reasons. Think of like Barack Obama in 2008 when he gave a speech and he was the first black president in America, and so many presidents that have given famous speeches in the past, like JFK, Roosevelt, on and on we could go. But there may be no more famous teaching than Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And it could be argued and proven probably that it may be the best teaching in history. In my opinion, it is. This teaching has influenced generation upon generation of both Jesus followers and non-Jesus followers. Gandhi was influenced by it. He practiced it even though he didn't believe it. Martin Luther King was certainly influenced by it. And many people have been influenced by it but don't even know they have been. Like it got filtered through a bunch of different people and a bunch of different ideas, and it landed in them, and they practice it, and they don't even know that it came from Jesus himself. It's the only teaching in history that completely defines what it means for a person to be in right relationship with God. So again, when we read the Gospel of Matthew, up to this point, we're in Matthew 5. We're going to be hanging there. If you got a Bible, you can pull it out. If you got a paper Bible, if you got a little phone Bible, anything you've got, pull it out. You can read with us. I'll put some stuff up here as well that you can observe this way, but it's good to look at your own. Through Matthew chapter 4, basically what's happened up to this point, before Matthew chapter 5, we see that Jesus has been tempted by the devil. He's fasting 40 days and 40 nights, no water, no food. He's triumphed over temptation perfectly. We see that John the Baptist has been arrested, and Jesus begins his ministry. So there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. Jesus goes to two fishermen, they're brothers, named Peter and Andrew. Many of you know who Peter is. He ended up being one of the most famous leaders in the church, most well-known. And he calls them to be his disciples, right while they're fishing. And they follow him. And at the time they follow him, they're probably drunk fishermen. Really. And then he went throughout all Galilee. This is the end of Matthew chapter 4. If you're there, you can see it. Teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria. And they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, those having seizures and paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and from Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. And then here we are in the Sermon on the Mount. One of the best teachings ever given. In my opinion, the best teaching ever given. So before we talk about it, I'm going to pray, because I want to lay myself before Christ right now. Jesus, I just come before you. I don't feel worthy in any way to deliver this teaching. But because of your sacrifice and what you've done, you've made me worthy to speak about it and to point to you. And I just pray that in everything that's said today, we would point to you, and that you would teach us today. You be our teacher. You be our teacher. You be the one that guides us. You be the one that leads us. Holy Spirit, just have your way right now. We just recognize that you're holy. You're good. You guide us. You live inside of us, Holy Spirit. You speak the words of Jesus to us. And we just recognize that we need you. We're desperate for you right now to illuminate our minds, illuminate our hearts, and teach us from your word today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So great crowds are gathered, and seeing the crowds, Jesus went up on the mountain. And when he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth and taught them. This is Matthew 5, 1 through 2. This mountain that Jesus is on, it probably looks like this. This is where they think it happened. This is where they think the Sermon on the Mount was delivered. Crowds and disciples were gathered around Jesus on a mountain. His voice was likely amplified in a natural amphitheater here, because he was standing probably up on the slope speaking down so people could hear. And Jesus is directing his teaching at his close followers, his disciples. Because up to this point, he had gathered a few, and some had come around him. And his disciples come close to him. The word for disciples in Greek is methetes. I think I'm pronouncing it correct. It means learner. It means pupil. It means follower. Often a disciple is a believer who's a close follower. But by the way, Jesus is talking to disciples, but he's also speaking to crowds. Because we see that these crowds have gathered. And again, we read in Matthew 4 before that Jesus has healed people. And a lot of people are really drawn to him, and they've seen this power that he has. And he's impacted a lot of lives, and they're like, who the heck is this guy? I want to hear from him. I want to know what he's about. Never seen anything like this. And Jesus spoke in a way that compelled both his disciples and the crowd to consider what he was saying, to listen, to hear it. And any disciple of Jesus, they'll imitate Jesus too. If you're a disciple today, you got to speak to both Jesus followers and those who don't follow Jesus too. Have you ever been like the receiver of somebody talking about things you don't understand? And they're talking with this lingo and this language, and you're like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm trying to think of a good example in the moment right now, but I think of some classes I've been in, or when I used to work at Progressive Insurance, and they would talk like, well, in the claims realm, you have to adjust the claim accordingly to the deductible that will be deciphered out, and people would talk in a way, and I'd be like, tell me speak to me in English, in layman's terms, please. Like Jesus speaks in a way that's relatable. He does. Do you ever think of what's coming out of your mouth as a Jesus follower? Do you ever think of the words you say? Like, as Jesus followers, we really study a lot of things. We know a lot of theological terminology, like substitutionary atonement and other very strange words. I could probably think of a lot of them right now, but you know what I'm saying. Do we speak in a way that is relatable, that's helpful? Like Jesus followers that are sensitive to the Holy Spirit, they'll communicate well, and they'll know their audience. They'll actually try to read the people they're around, and then they won't be like that corporate guy that speaks in a training thing at Progressive that I was thinking of, that's talking all this weird lingo, all this weird Christianese. Christians can be guilty of using Christianese. And then people that don't know anything about Jesus are like, what in the heck are you talking about, man? You're just weird. When we think of this audience too, on another note, we realize Jesus is both defining what it means to be a disciple of him, and he's contrasting it with the way that both non-disciples and hypocrites live. Ouch. So he's speaking simultaneously to these three crowds. Number one, disciples, methetes, apprentices, followers of Jesus. People that want to follow him. A lot of them didn't know who the heck he was yet. They had a lot to learn, but they wanted to give all to him. And two, there were religious hypocrites there too. There were people that were religious people. They were just being religious, following rules. Their hearts were far from God, but they had done all the right things on the outside and appeared to have it together, and Jesus was going to address them. And man, was he ever going to address them. Non-disciples were there too. People that had maybe been healed by Jesus and didn't even believe in who he was. And we're still wrestling with who God was. And he's speaking simultaneously to all three of those people. They're all there. Jesus did it. I'm trying to do the same thing. How about you? If you're a Jesus follower, are you speaking to all three of those things? Disciples, religious people, non-disciples. Do you hang out with only disciples? Then you're not one and neither are they. If you hang out with only disciples, you're probably a religious person. I hate to say that. We close ourselves in as Jesus followers. We do. And I mean, people that think they're disciples and people that want to be disciples, and then they surround themselves with disciples who disciple each other and disciple each other and disciple each other. They close in and they close in and they close in and they close in until they have no influence on anybody except each other. That's a dangerous thing. That's a dangerous thing. And again, I don't know if it's wrong or it's just not effective. Disciples should influence everyone around them. They don't just hang out in a clique. And it doesn't matter what you call it. If you call it evangelical church or mainline church or traditional church or missional church. We want to be disciples. We want to influence one another, and we want to influence our culture. and our sphere of influence. On another side of this, do you hang out with only non-Jesus followers? Do you spend all your time with people that don't follow? And you are a follower, you proclaim to be a disciple. But you only hang out with people that are outside. Man, be careful there too. Be careful there too. Because you know what? If you're just surrounded by that, you're going to probably start justifying things you shouldn't. You see the tension here that we got to live in? Like, we got to be surrounded by people that really are influencing us for Christ and building us up. And then we got to be on mission as a united front, locked arms. We can't just be in a little enclave, in a tiny little fenced-in area of our own comfort. We got to get beyond that. So again, Jesus digs into this teaching. This is the setup. And then we're in verse 3 where he says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Matthew 5:3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed, it means happy, it means fortunate. It's actually kind of a term of congratulation and recommendation, in a sense. And poor in spirit means poor, beggar, destitute. I mean, poor means that. Poor, beggar, destitute, in deep need. And then spirit means non-material being, like the spiritual part, the unseen and unobservable substance of somebody. So this proves the kingdom of heaven doesn't result in stuff, but in quality of the soul. The kingdom of heaven doesn't result in external blessing, it results in internal blessing. Sometimes external blessings happen. The blessed are the poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. A poverty of spirit leads to a quality of soul, of character, of integrity. Poor in spirit, people that are, they'll be oppressed at times, but they'll trust God to deliver them. They'll trust that God is their number one epicenter of everything, the one that matters the most, the one thing they're going for. In Luke it says, "Blessed are the poor," by the way. And again, a lot of people confuse this. Like, what does Jesus mean? Is he saying that you're more blessed when you have less resources, when you have less material goods? Well, God has a place in his heart for the poor. He sure does. People that have less are more likely to turn towards God, yeah. Most of us in America are rich. All of us really are rich comparatively to the globe. Even people that are in poverty in America are rich comparatively to people in a third world country. So we have less openness maybe as a culture, and maybe the poor, people that have less, are more open. But what's really being talked about here is a poverty of spirit. A poverty of spirit. And the kingdom of heaven has always blown up amongst the poor in spirit. Never when it's in bed with power, comfort, or security. Whenever it is, it gets jacked up. Just review history. I'm telling you, man, I challenge you. Read over the last 2,000 years. You'll see the history of the church. Underground movement, minority, making a difference in culture, a force to be reckoned with in culture, making change, impacting their society, and then they get in bed with power. They get in bed with the state. They get in bed with government, and then they get all whacked out. And they start twisting Scripture over and over. And then more underdogs rise up, and they make a difference. And it keeps happening over and over and over. If you study any movement of the church in history, you'll see that same thing. Like the early church. First 300 years of the church. Man, were they underground. They were hated by the religious people of the time, who were Jewish, who were the Pharisees and Sadducees, which were basically people who were Jewish that were corrupting the meaning of the Old Testament. They were twisting it. And they were killing Christians. And then, if that wasn't enough, early Christians were being killed and persecuted by the Roman government as well. And both were happening at the same time. And they were forced to go underground and be in homes. And they grew like crazy. You know one of the biggest ways they grew? They had meals and invited people in and hung out with people. And they took communion and they shared Jesus with everybody they knew. And they invited people into their family that were going through terrible things. And this thing spread like wildfire. No persecution could stamp it out. The church in China right now is blowing up like crazy because of this, because it's an underground movement. And it has multiplied like crazy, and you can't even quantify it. You can't even count it, because it's not an establishment. Slaves in America. Talk about a movement. The African American community in America. What a movement of the gospel. People that were oppressed and shoved into boats, crammed together, sometimes killed on their way over, and then put into forced slavery and not paid and treated like garbage with no opportunity. And then they hear about the gospel, and then they really get it. The people that are preaching it to them are preaching a hypocritical version of it, and then they really get it, and they own it, and they live it. And then years later, we have people like Martin Luther King who rises up in the name of Christ to change the world. It's always been an underground movement. Always will be. No matter how it looks. No matter how confusing it gets. Always is. Jesus goes on in the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew 5:4, he says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." You ever had a bad day? Check this video out.
All right, Mr. Geller, right this way. So, how dark do you want to be? We have 1, 2, or 3.
Well, I like how you look. What are you?
Puerto Rican.
2. I think a 2.
You're gonna face the red light. When the red light goes on, the spraying's about to start, so close your eyes. When the spraying stops, count to 5. Pat yourself down to avoid drip marks, then turn around so we can get your back. Got it?
Spray, count, pat, and turn. Spray, count, and pat.
Wow, you catch on quick.
Well, I have a PhD, so. One Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. I'm not finished counting! You sprayed my front twice.
You never turned?
No, I barely even got to 3 Mississippi.
Mississippi? I said count to 5.
Mississippi, Leslie? Well, how bad is it?
Not that bad yet, but it keeps getting darker for the next 4 hours.
So how dark is it gonna get?
Oh, you got sprayed with 2 2s and...
I'm a 4?
Yeah, but your back's a 0. You're gonna want to even that out.
Really?
You might want to get back in there.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute, there's no light on the back wall. How do I know when it's gonna start? Hello? The same thing happened again.
You got 2 more 2s?
I'm an 8.
Hold on. There's something different.
I went to that tanning place your wife suggested.
Was that place the Sun?
You ever had a bad day? I love Friends, man. I'm sorry. It's one of my weaknesses. Really. What's the worst day you've ever had in your life? What's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? How'd you deal with it? Blessed are those who mourn. They shall be comforted. It's heavy. Mourn means penseo. It's to grieve over. It's to be sad. That's what mourn means. People run to all sorts of things to deal with grief. I have. Have you? Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime. It's my go-tos, man. I'm having a bad day. I just want to sit on my butt and watch the TV. Video games. Man, when I was a kid, I loved video games so much that I told my mom, I love video games more than you, Mom. I love Atari 2600 more than you. Leave me alone. Just let me play my video games and don't talk to me. Video games, man, they give me an escape. You can play it 3 a.m., not even know the time passed. I've done it. Social media, wow, we're littered with that, aren't we? I spend plenty of time on Instagram and Facebook, but I try not to spend too much. But I've had times where I'm too deep in it. How many likes you get, how many followers you get, how many people looked at this video you put up or this or that, and we grade ourselves based on that, and we run from that day that happened, that one thing that happened, or that thing that happened this week, or the most traumatizing thing that ever happened to us. We run, and we run, and we run. Sex, we get into sex, man. We use sex for that, whether it's, TV sex, pornography stuff, whether it's with people, whether it's using people for that to try to get ourselves numb, to escape that moment that happened, or that thing that happened to us that we just can't seem to get over, we can't seem to cope with. The wound is too deep. Drugs, alcohol, we smoke stuff, we eat stuff, we swallow stuff, we snort stuff, we drink stuff, hoping it'll medicate and get rid of that one thing, or get rid of that series of things, or maybe there's a bunch of things. Maybe when I say that to you, you don't have one thing, you have a bunch of them. And they're all just jumbled up in a big knot mess, a big knotted mess, and you just can't get past it. Work. People do it with work. I've done it with work. Man, the first 3 years I planted this church, I was working 60 hours a week, man. Burning myself out. And it's not like I wanted to do that, but there have been times, I did it out of necessity during that time, but there have definitely been times where I did it because I felt like I was escaping something inside of me, running from what I really needed to attend to, what I really needed to take care of. I needed to take care of something inside of me that was going on. Money. People want to get more and more money, and maybe if I get more and I spend more and I get more stuff, stuff does it too. Cars, houses, technology, guitars. Oh man, weakness right there, man. Guitar pedals. I'm a musician, stuff like that. We all have things that draw us. But disciples of Jesus recognize their needs and deepest hurts, and they lay them before God's feet. Let me say that again. Disciples of Jesus recognize their needs and deepest hurts, and they lay them before God's feet and stare the beast in the face. They stare the beast in the face. The deepest hurt, the hardest thing. They stare it right in the face. And they let it hurt. It's painful, but it's healing. Now, people aren't supposed to mourn about bad tanning salon moments. That's a little thing. Also not supposed to mourn about the grass not being green on your side. You ever had this issue? I sure have. It'll be better when I move there. It'll be better when I have that job. It'll be better when I have that person in my life. It'll be better when it'll be better when we get to, it'll be better. That's when it'll be really better. It'll be really better. Right now it sucks a little bit, but it's going to be better when, fill in the blank. That's discontentedness. It's discontentedness. Contentedness is an attitude. It can be cultivated. How about losing money or possessions or stuff in our house breaking? Because your account went negative, you're freaking out and everything's falling apart. I've sure done that. Sarah knows, my wife knows, man. She's seen me do it. I get freaked out at home if everything's not in perfect order everywhere. Things like that. Stuff in our house breaking, you have some prized possession that got broken, your car got busted, you had a total loss, you have something that really mattered to you, like this porcelain little piece of something that broke, and you're that day that it happened, you're really upset. Or how about being gut checked? How about our pride? We're not supposed to mourn about that either. How about somebody told you something you really didn't want to hear, but you know it's true? And you're mourning over it. You're feeling sorry for yourself. probably because they, you know how they are. I mean, they got this problem. Why don't they talk about their problem? You know, they have to tell it to me. I'm supposed to mourn about that stuff. Jesus' followers are supposed to mourn about offending God. When you go against his word, you should mourn. And again, here's the thing that's crazy, man. You can mourn. You're forgiven this fast, man. Right when you did it, you've already been forgiven. If you're a Jesus follower, the gospel covers you totally, and you're totally forgiven even before you did it. But to get past it yourself, you got to mourn. Because it's what you have to do to get past it. And it's a natural human response, and there's something that should grieve us inside when we go against what God wants. How about really tough trials in life? You know, we should mourn if things are hard. How about lack of joy in Christ? Like, I remember when I was so happy when I followed Jesus during this era, during these years, and now not so much. I wish I could just go back. I wish I could go back to that. It's okay to feel that and lay that before God. It's good to mourn about hypocrisy. When you see people that say they live for Jesus, but they're not acting like it. It's good to mourn over injustice when you see violence and hate and crime and awful things happening in the world that you have no control over. You should mourn about that. It should hurt you until you want to do something about it. And in the long run, mourning about the right things leads to purer and greater joy overall, along with the ability to weather bad stuff better and better. God comforts the right kind of mourning. God deepens intimacy and connection with him through it. That's what it means to mourn. What does it mean to be meek? One time when I was about 8 years old, pre-Jesus, I was at my Aunt Andrea and Uncle Bob's house. And we were watching TV, and my Aunt Andrea was running the vacuum, and it was loud. And my Uncle Bob was irritated because he was watching football, and he liked football a lot. And he did not want to miss the game. So he started turning up the volume on the TV. And then it became a vacuum versus volume war. She's vacuuming, he's getting mad, he's turning up the volume, and eventually I say, Bob, shut up or I'll kill you. It's not very meek. One time in about 2008, I had been following Jesus for 8 years. I was having some dinner at a restaurant with my friend, and I knew he was struggling with pornography, and I thought I was pretty awesome that I had overcome that difficulty in my life. So we're meeting, and I'm one-on-one with him. Sarah's one-on-one with his wife in the same restaurant at Applebee's. At Applebee's, we're hanging out. And then I tell him, listen, man, if you don't tell your wife right now that you struggle with this, I'm going to go tell her. Not very meek. Blessed are the meek. They shall inherit the earth. Meek means gentle. Mr. Rogers was a good example. Better than me. The ability to be calm amidst difficulties in life. It's kind, it's submissive. It's not in a wimpy sense that way, but in a respectful sense. It's willing to forgive. It's willing to be insulted and mistreated, even willing to be beaten and killed for Christ. Meekness says, God, do whatever you want with my life, and doesn't complain when the challenges of that promise come. And I tend to be a complainer. Again, ask my wife. Ask my kids. How about you? You complain? I do. Meekness is quietness and humility. Like Jesus before Pilate. You ever read about this? Jesus is about to get crucified, and he's before Pilate, and he doesn't say a word. He doesn't defend himself at all. He just shuts his mouth. He didn't have anything to say in that moment. You'd think that would be the time he's talking a lot, right? In the roller coaster of up and down emotions, meekness is a steady line. It never thinks it deserves anything or has earned anything. It's content with whatever's happening. It celebrates when others have it better than them. It gladly accepts help and support from others. So convicting. One of the biggest struggles in my life, meekness. Real humility. Character deep humility. Being poor in spirit, being a mourner, being meek, they're all the opposite of how we naturally are, friends. It's a fact. When we read the Sermon on the Mount, all this teaching is insanely challenging. And that's why you need to buckle your seatbelt. Through these many weeks we're going to do this. As we look into the Sermon on the Mount, it's going to challenge us. If you read it regularly, it'll challenge you. May we practice poverty in spirit. May we practice mourning together. May we practice meekness. In our DNA groups and missional communities, that's the structure we have if you don't know it. Chapel Kenmore, we meet in missional communities. If you want to know more about that, we meet in DNA groups that do discipleship. If you want to know more, come ask me. But may we practice these things, because guess what? Jesus isn't just the best teacher in the world. He's the Son of God. He's our great high priest. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Hebrews 4. Jesus was tempted and died for every way that you're rich in spirit. Every moment of arrogance you've ever had or will ever have, that you thought you had it together, that you thought you were religious and you did things right, or you thought you were good and doing it right, Jesus died for all that stuff. He was tempted in every way that way and never succumbed to it. And then he died for you. He was tempted in every way and died for every way, that you avoid mourning. Like if you run to things, if you run to Netflix, if you run to fill in the blank, if you run to a substance, if you run to something to numb you, he died for that. He was tempted in every way and died for your anti-meekness, your harshness, your pride. He died for every moment that you said a harsh thing. Man, I'm sure glad that's true. I'm sure glad he's changing me. And because of that great forgiveness and mercy, we can genuinely cry out, Lord, change us. Lord, change us. And may we all cry that together right now. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Let us draw near. God, we draw near right now. Jesus, we draw near to you. Teach us what it means to be poor in spirit. Teach us what it means to mourn. Teach us what it means to be meek the way you want us to be. And we're never going to have to completely arrive at that on this side of heaven. We're not going to totally get there, but we can taste more and more of it because we have your forgiveness. We have your forgiveness on our side. Thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.